Hello again, my DIY loving friends. I'm Sarah and this is Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. Are you looking to turn budget finds into designer dreams? Well, you're in the right place. In today's video, we're diving into some jaw-dropping Dollar Tree hacks that will glam up your space without breaking the bank. So what are you waiting for? Let's go DIY together. For this DIY, I'm starting with these small wood cubes from Dollar Tree, and I'm making 25 groups of 4 of these wood cubes in a square shape, as you see me doing right here. I'm going to glue the sets of 4 cubes together. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick wood glue, which I will link for you in the description box below, but you can also use the Super Glue wood glue from Dollar Tree to do this too. I start by gluing 2 cubes together and then the 2 sets of 2 cubes together. So there'll be 4. And I'm going to do that, as I said, 25 times to make 25 sets of 4 cubes. I'm using Minwax wood filler, which I will link for you below, to fill in the cracks between the 4 cubes on the top side, trying to make them look more like cohesive squares, like larger wood squares, and not 4 cubes that are glued together. I'm going to do that on all 25 of my 4 cube squares. Once the wood filler dries, I use this sanding block to sand down the excess filler and make the tops of my wood squares smooth. So I've got 25 of these squares, and I'm going to make a checkerboard pattern by painting the squares. So 12 of the squares are being painted with this Apple Barrel white gloss paint, which I will link for you below. And I paint the top of the square as well as any of the sides of the squares that will be visible on the checkerboard, like the squares at the top and on the sides of the squares on the edges, and hopefully that makes sense to you. I don't need to paint the sides on the squares that are positioned on the inside of the checkerboard because you won't see them. For these gloss white squares, I did 2 coats of paint for full coverage and put them aside to fully dry. For the other half of the checkerboard, I'm painting 13 of the squares using a mixture of water and this Apple Barrel khaki color, which I will link for you below, to make a natural wood tone stain. And just like the white squares, I'm painting the tops and just the sides that are visible on the checkerboard. Using the khaki paint mixture, I use a dry paper towel to wipe away the excess liquid and then put the 13 stained squares aside to dry. Next, I grabbed this Folk Art Metallic Champagne Shimmer Paint, which I will link for you below. I used this in a video last week on some Jenga blocks, and I'm loving this color. I'm going to put 1 coat of this Champagne Shimmer Paint over the white gloss painted squares to give them a bit of shine and shimmer in a very subtle way, and then I'm going to let that dry. On my khaki stained squares, to give them the subtlest bit of shine, I'm using this Decor Art Metallic Extreme Sheen in 24 karat, which I will link for you below. I'm just going to lightly dry brush some of this gold over the natural wood tones of these 13 squares along the edges and a little over the tops to make them shine, but still retain their natural wood look. And after using the gold, I grabbed my antique wax, which I will link for you below, and I'm going to use a tiny bit of the antique wax to distress paint the natural wood tone and gold blocks to give them even more character and tons of dimension. And for my champagne shimmer and white wood squares, I made a mixture of this Folk Art Enamel and Calypso Sky, which I will link for you below. I mixed the blue with a little bit of antique wax to mute the color and give me more of a patina look. And I'm using a small brush. I used the muted blue paint on the edges of the shimmery squares to give them a bit of an aged patina look, giving them some visual interest. I had 4 of these tiny wooden people in my stash, and I'll link them for you below. I had already painted them with the white gloss, and I went over that white paint with some of that champagne shimmer paint that I had used on half of my squares. And once that dried, I used a tiny brush to paint a stripe of that muted blue patina color around the indentation of the little wooden people. And I allowed those to dry a little bit, and I also used a little bit of the antique wax over all 4 of the wooden people to give them an aged, distressed look to coordinate with my wood squares. I assembled my checkerboard pattern with my 2-tone squares, and I'm going to start by gluing my 5 rows of 5 squares together by rows, because remember, we have 25 of these squares. And I also made sure that the squares with their sides painted are the squares on the outer edges of the checkerboard, and the unpainted sides of the squares are in the inside. Then I'm going to glue my 5 rows of 5 squares together to create my 5x5 checkerboard. To strengthen the 5x5 square, I turned it over and used several wood coffee stir sticks glued to the back to help hold everything in place. And I used some hot glue to attach my 4 wood people to the 4 corners of my checkerboard as feet to give it some height. And oh my goodness, you guys, I adore this little checkerboard riser. I am so in love with the finishes and colors on this. I love everything about it. The style of this is identical, in my opinion, to a very upscale Mackenzie Childs decor piece. This is one of those DIYs that just shocked me as to how much I loved how it turned out. And yes, I am gushing over this because, come on, these are $1.25 wood cubes from Dollar Tree, and just look at what we did with them. I only hope you guys love this as much as I do. Truly a favorite. This next easy DIY starts with this wood pencil holder, which I know you can get at Dollar Tree, but I think I got a set of these elsewhere, so I'll link them below. But you can find them at Dollar Tree. I also have this large wood cube that is definitely from Dollar Tree. I'm going to paint the cube on all 4 sides using some antique wax, and I don't need to paint the top or the bottom of the cube because it won't be seen, so I am just painting the sides. Then I'm going to paint the wood pencil holder also with the antique wax. I'm going to paint it on all sides as well as the top edges, and also a couple of inches down into the inside of the cup, just in case that part of the inside is visible. Once the 2 pieces are dry, I'm using some wood glue to attach the cube to the bottom of the pencil cup, and I allow that to fully dry. Next, I have this thick jute twine that I will link for you below, but really any jute would work for this. I cut a bunch of pieces that are about 3 inches long. It's not exact, about 3 inches. With a bunch of short pieces cut, I'm going to now make a small circle with wrapped jute. So using my hot glue to hold it in place, I begin wrapping the jute around itself until it gets to be a little larger than a quarter, but not quite as big as a $50 coin. I put the circle of jute aside and I begin to unravel all those short pieces of jute until I just have a bunch of unraveled jute pieces. I turn the jute circle upside down and I hot glue a bunch of my unraveled jute to the back of the circle, first going in one direction and then a bunch going across that, sort of like a plus sign. Then I'm going to add in more unraveled jute in between the plus sign shapes so that the unraveled jute encircles the outside of my jute circle, and I use more hot glue to hold all that unraveled jute in place. Then I unravel the jute pieces even more to make them fluffy all around the wrapped circle, and I take a scissors and start trimming the fluffed jute pieces all around. I'm just trimming and fluffing and trimming and fluffing. I also use a small wire dog brush to brush out the jute fringe pieces even more, and I continue to trim until everything looks even and it is the size that I am looking for. Lastly, I use some hot glue on the back of my little jute flower and attach it to the front of the wood pencil holder. And this is my super simple and super easy little wooden plant holder or pen holder or anything holder, really. Just a simple wood DIY with some boho vibes and a perfect addition to anyone's neutral decor, and really, could it get any easier? This next DIY begins with this 3-inch wood round that I will link for you below, and I'm also using some of these large scallop seashells. And full disclosure, I collected these from my husband's favorite ceviche takeout. I actually ran them through the dishwasher to make sure that they were super clean, and now I'm using some hot glue to attach them on the bottom to the edge of the wood round, kind of like petals of a flower. I also have this bag of seashells from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using those as well. I had picked out some of the nicer looking smaller shells from Dollar Tree, and off camera, I hot glued some of them overlapping the seams of the larger shells where they meet inside of my little seashell flower. And now I'm going to hot glue those same shells over the overlap and the overlapping seams on the outside of the seashell flower where the two large seashells meet, as you can see me doing right here. And these are all from the bag of seashells that you can get at the Dollar Tree. And lastly, I use some hot glue on the edge of this Dollar Tree ceramic candle holder and attach the candle holder to the wood round bottom of my seashell flower. And this is my summer seashell candle holder, just a really beachy outdoor candle holder, perfect for your outdoor dining tablescape. You could make a set of them for a centerpiece, just a really nice way to use those stray seashells you always have hiding out somewhere in your home or in your husband's dinner, as is the case for me. Thanks for joining me on this creative journey. If you love these Dollar Tree designer hacks, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And hit that subscribe button for budget-friendly DIY magic. Let me know in the comments which DIY was your favorite and why. You know I love hearing from all of you. Until next time, remember that together we're making the world a more beautiful place, one DIY at a time.